Hey there! Have you ever thought about trying to solve the biggest mystery there is? I'm talking about the history of life on Earth. It's this incredible story that spans billions of years, filled with twists and turns and a cast of characters you couldn't even make up. So today, let's put on our detective hats. We're going to uncover the clues and piece together the evidence for evolution. Our investigation starts right now.
So, where do you even start with a mystery this big? I mean, there are no history books written by the first bacteria. The planet didn't exactly keep a journal for us. So the real puzzle is this: how do we read a history that has no words? How can we possibly know what happened millions or even billions of years ago? Well, it turns out the answer is written all around us and even inside of us.
All right, our investigation starts right under our feet. The ground we walk on, it's not just dirt and rock. It's basically a library of ancient history. These are the very first clues in our case file, the clues in the stone.
And the most important clues we find down there are, of course, fossils. Now, when you hear fossil, you might picture a giant T-Rex skeleton, but it's so much more than that. A fossil can be a bone that's been slowly replaced by minerals, a tiny insect perfectly preserved in amber, or even just a footprint some ancient creature left in the mud. The key thing is, they're all direct physical evidence of life that came before us.
Here's a cool way to think about it. The Earth basically keeps a diary. Every single page is a new layer of sediment, sand, mud, silt, that settles at the bottom of oceans and lakes. And over millions and millions of years, these layers get squished together into rock, trapping all sorts of clues inside.
So, how do we actually read this diary? Well, it's all thanks to a really fundamental idea called the law of superposition. And honestly, it's beautifully simple. New layers of rock form on top of old ones. That's it. So the deeper you dig, the further back in time you go. It means a fossil you find way down deep is way, way older than one you find near the surface. Simple as that.
And when we piece together all these fossil clues from all over the world, we get what we call the fossil record. And let me tell you, it tells a breathtaking story. It proves that, yep, ancient life forms were real. It shows us a mind-boggling diversity of life, and it reveals a pretty sobering fact. Most of the species that have ever lived on this planet are now extinct. But most importantly, it shows us this gradual, constant change of life forms over immense spans of time.
But hold on, the clues aren't just buried in the ground. Actually, some of the most powerful evidence is walking, swimming, and flying all around us right now. So for our next stop, let's look at the blueprints hidden in the body. Our first clue from anatomy is something called a homologous structure. It's a bit of a mouthful, but the idea is simple. It's when you see different animals that have a body part with the same underlying design, but they use it for totally different things. So why would that happen? Well, all the evidence points to one thing. They inherited that basic blueprint from a common ancestor. A classic example? Just look at a human arm and a whale flipper. One's for grabbing stuff, the other's for swimming. Completely different jobs, right? But if you look at the bones inside, you see the exact same pattern. One upper arm bone, two forearm bones, and a set of little bones for the wrist and fingers. It's the same basic toolkit, just tweaked for a different purpose. Now, every good detective knows you have to watch out for red herrings, clues that look real but are actually misleading. In this case, that brings us to analogous structures. These are body parts that do the same job, like flying, but are built in completely different ways. And that tells us they do not share a recent common ancestor for that trait. A bat's wing and a butterfly's wing are a perfect example. They're both for flight, obviously, but a bat's wing is made of those same arm bones we just talked about, with skin stretched between long finger bones. A butterfly's wing? It's got no bones at all. It's a totally different engineering solution to the very same problem. Okay, our final anatomical clue is maybe the weirdest and coolest: vestigial structures. Think of these as evolutionary leftovers, like the tiny, useless little leg bones that are found buried inside the bodies of some whales. They don't do anything to help the whale swim, but they are a clear echo from a time when their ancestors actually walked on land. So let's pause and connect the dots. We've looked at clues from the stone and blueprints from the body. The fossil record clearly shows us a long history of change over time, and when we look at living things, we see that they're all kind of variations on shared ancestral themes. All the evidence is pointing in one very clear direction. Okay, so we've gathered all this incredible evidence that proves life has changed over time. That's a huge piece of the puzzle, but it really only solves part of the mystery. The next, and maybe even bigger question for our investigation is, how? What's the mechanism that's actually driving all this change? Well, this brings us to the mastermind behind the whole operation, the brilliant process that explains how this all happens. We're talking about the engine of change, a process called natural selection.
Natural selection basically works in 4 key steps. First, you just have to look around. In any group of animals or plants, there's always variation. No 2 individuals are ever exactly the same. Second, the environment is always changing, and it presents challenges. Third, some of those individuals happen to have traits that give them a little bit of an edge in surviving and having kids in that specific environment. And finally, over many, many generations, those helpful traits become more and more common because the individuals who have them are the ones passing them on.
And the end result of this whole process? That's what we call adaptation. It's how a species, as a whole, gets better and better suited to its environment over time. And it's important to remember, it's not about one single animal changing during its lifetime, but about the whole population slowly changing over generations. You see this process in action everywhere in nature. It's why the famous finches in the Galapagos evolved different beaks to crack open different kinds of seeds. It's why giraffes with slightly longer necks could reach more food, survive better, and have more long-necked babies. And it's why an animal whose color provides better camouflage is more likely to avoid getting eaten and live long enough to pass on its genes.
And this all points to something absolutely crucial. That variation we talked about, it's not just interesting, it's essential for survival. This quote really says it all. Having lots of diversity in a population is like having a big toolkit. You never know what challenges are coming, but when the environment changes, a species with more tools, more variation, has a much better shot at having the right one to survive.
So, our detective story, which started with some ancient rocks, has brought us right up to the present day. We've uncovered not just the history of life, but the very engine that powers its constant change. Which, of course, leads us to one final, big question. Here's the thing. The fossil record is like our history book. But evolution didn't just stop sometime in the past. It's happening right now, all around us. The evidence shows that life is a story that is constantly being written, a mystery that just keeps on unfolding. The clues are everywhere, just waiting for the next generation of detectives to figure out what the next chapter is going to look like.